You ever feel your life shatter, not in one crash, but like a glass table cracking quietly under weight, slow, splintered, until suddenly you're standing in the wreckage? That was me. On what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Tux pressed. Guests seated. Music just starting to float down the aisle. And then the doors opened, not for the bride, but for Aubrey. My ex. Wearing a black dress like she was mourning something, and maybe she was. But what stopped me cold wasn't her dress or her nerve. It was the boy on her hip. He couldn't have been older than 3. Big brown eyes. Mess of curls. And a frown I'd seen in the mirror too many times to mistake. I didn't need a DNA test to know. But I got one anyway. Because denial dies hard, and hope's got teeth. Let me back up. My name's Gavin. And not long ago, I was a man about to get married. To Nora, someone who showed up in my life after the dust of Aubrey had finally settled. Nora was everything Aubrey wasn't. Steady. Soft-spoken. She'd listen like what you said mattered, even when you weren't sure it did. I met her in the checkout line at a grocery store, fumbling with a broken bottle of marinara and a loaf of bread I'd already dropped once. She laughed. Offered to help clean it up. That's how it started. We weren't fast, but we were intentional. No whirlwind. No fireworks. Just kindling that built something warm. Reliable. So I did the thing. I proposed. She said yes. And together, we planned a life that felt like it could last. Then Aubrey came back. We hadn't spoken in years. Last I heard, she was finding herself, which in her language meant leaving behind anything that looked like accountability. I'd loved her once. Too much. Enough to overlook the recklessness, the hot and cold routines, the days she'd vanish into her own head and come back like nothing happened. She left without much of a goodbye. Just a note taped to my fridge and a voicemail saying, "Don't wait for me." I didn't. But standing in that church hallway, watching her stride in like she had every right, holding a child whose face echoed mine like some kind of cruel echo, everything inside me screamed. Jacob, my best man, was the one who found me first. He'd actually run, which the guy never did for anything short of a championship game, and when he got to me, his face was pale. "She's here," he said, catching his breath. "Aubrey. She's outside. With a kid." I blinked. "A kid?" He nodded. "Gavin, he looks like you." I don't remember walking out of the chapel. I just remember standing in that foyer, watching the woman I once thought I'd marry rock a child on her hip with my nose, my mouth, my damn eyebrows, and knowing in my gut what the paperwork would confirm days later. Nora came out a second after me. Still in her wedding dress. Still perfect. Until her face changed. She looked at Aubrey. Then the kid. Then me. "What's going on?" she asked, voice sharp with the kind of calm you only hear before a tornado hits. Aubrey smiled, all teeth, no warmth. "Just introducing Liam to his father." Nora's gaze shifted back to me. "Tell me she's lying." I opened my mouth. But nothing came out. Because I didn't know. And that not knowing was already tearing everything apart. Nora said she wanted a DNA test. Said she wasn't walking down that aisle until she knew the truth. Then she turned and walked away. Left me standing there with a child I might have made and a future already unraveling. The music didn't stop. Not right away. It kept playing, something soft, something hopeful. But there wasn't going to be a ceremony that day. Not like we'd planned. Maybe not ever. You learn a lot about yourself when your life gets split open in public. Standing there, tucks itching against my skin, champagne going warm in my hand, guests whispering down the hall like 1,000 moths hitting a windowpane, what I learned was this. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was hollow. Because sometimes the worst betrayals aren't loud. They're quiet. They come wrapped in a face you used to kiss goodnight. In a child who didn't ask for any of this. Aubrey didn't gloat. She just stood there, shifting Liam on her hip, like she'd done the hard thing and was waiting for me to catch up. I couldn't even look at her. But I looked at him. Liam. And yeah, every instinct in me screamed he was mine. But I still needed the truth. So I made the call. Private clinic. Rush results. Hair sample. Cheek swab. No games. Aubrey didn't fight it. He deserves to know, she said. And for a moment, I saw something in her face I hadn't expected. Not guilt. Fear. Not for herself. For him. But I couldn't afford to read into it. Not yet. The test would take 48 hours. 48 hours to know if my entire future just got rewritten by a toddler with my eyes and a woman with a hurricane heart. Nora stayed locked in the bridal suite. I stayed outside her door for an hour, just sitting there, tux wrinkled, jacket off, tie loosened like maybe I could loosen time with it. She didn't come out. And when she finally did, she didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just said the wedding was on pause. Not cancelled. Not yet. But something in her voice told me the part of her that trusted me, might be. And I couldn't blame her. Because some truths don't just come back. They kick down the door. And this one? It brought a kid. And a secret. And a storm I wasn't ready for. They say silence is golden. But let me tell you, there's nothing precious about the kind that settles after your wedding implodes in slow motion. That night, I didn't go back to the venue. Didn't text Nora. Didn't call Aubrey. I went home. And sat in the middle of an apartment decorated for a party that never happened. Streamers still curled along the doorway. Place cards sat on the kitchen table, hand-lettered in Nora's perfect script. There were little favors tied with ribbon, thank you notes we planned to fill out together. All of it, untouched. Like a museum of the life we almost had. I took off the tux. Hung it back up. Not out of respect, just muscle memory. I've always been the kind of man who doesn't leave clothes on the floor, even when his life's in pieces. The fridge was full of catered food we never served. I didn't eat any of it. I just stood there, staring at a tray of mini quiches, wondering how the hell a man goes from groom to question mark in under an hour. I barely slept. I paced. I checked my phone so often I started doing it even when it hadn't buzzed. No calls from Nora. Just one text from Aubrey, short and strange. He's always liked apples before bed. I didn't know if you'd want to know that. I didn't respond. Because I didn't know how to talk to the woman who might have stolen 3 years of fatherhood from me. The next morning, I got a call I didn't expect. Blocked number. Normally I wouldn't answer. But something in me, some frayed, aching instinct, made me pick up. It was a man's voice. Low. Nervous. The kind of voice that checks its own corners. You don't know me, he said. But I know Aubrey. We met through a mutual friend in Atlanta. Atlanta. That word dropped like a stone in my chest. I think she's not telling you everything, he continued. I don't want to get involved, but, if you're about to take on a kid and change your life, you should have all the facts. She wasn't just passing through town when she left you. What are you saying? I asked. He hesitated, then said, check your email. Then he hung up. I checked. There was a message waiting. No name. No subject line. Just a forwarded airline itinerary and a screenshot of an Instagram photo. The flight was dated 3.5 years ago, around the time Aubrey left me. Departure city, Atlanta. Passenger, Aubrey K. Summers. The Instagram photo was fuzzier. A backyard party. A barbecue. Aubrey smiling, beer in hand. And next to her, my brother, Jason. It hit me all at once. Jason. The golden child. The wanderer. The one who could charm a locked door open and convince you it wanted to swing wide. He and I hadn't talked in years. Last I heard, he was living out west, trying to figure things out. We didn't part on great terms. There'd been some family fallout, money, responsibility, the usual scars. But this? Him with her. The woman who broke me. I stared at the photo until my screen dimmed from inactivity. Then I called Nora. She didn't answer. But 2 hours later, she showed up at my place. Hair pulled back, no makeup, like she hadn't slept either. She didn't come in right away. Just stood in the doorway, like she wasn't sure she belonged here anymore. I got a message, she said. I blinked. From who? She handed me her phone. She didn't go to the police, not yet. Maybe she didn't trust them. Maybe she didn't want to drag me in deeper. Unlisted number. One line. Tell Gavin to stop asking about Jason. Not everyone wants him found. I felt the blood drain from my face. You think this is real? I asked. I think someone's watching, she said. And I think Aubrey's not the only one hiding something. I drove to Aubrey's Airbnb the next morning. Didn't text. Didn't knock softly. I just pounded on the door until she opened it. She looked surprised, but not scared. You saw it, she said. Like it wasn't a question. I held up my phone with the photo. How long? She closed her eyes. Not long after I left you. And Liam? I don't know, she whispered. He might be yours. He might be Jason's. She looked like she'd been punched. I need the truth, I said. I don't care how ugly it is. Just say it. Aubrey backed into the living room and sat down. Liam was sleeping on the couch, blanket half slipped from his shoulder. I watched her tuck it back gently before speaking. He told me not to tell you. Said it'd only mess things up more. But a few months ago, he started acting different. Said people were watching him. Said he'd found something big, something that could blow up his whole past. I stared at her. Found what? She shook her head. He never told me. Just said that if anything ever happened to him, I was supposed to bring Liam to you. Make sure you took care of him. I didn't know what to say. My brother, the man who disappeared from my life, had vanished for real. And now I was left with his trail, his son, maybe mine, and a woman who'd cracked my life wide open once before. The DNA results came in 2 days later. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Simple, sterile language. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. Liam was mine. And just like that, every plan I'd made, every version of my future, changed. Not because of a wedding. But because of a child. And the brother who left behind more than just secrets. He left behind a war. One I didn't even know I was part of. The morning after I opened that envelope, I watched Liam eat applesauce with his fingers. He was sitting at the tiny kitchen table in the Airbnb, swinging his legs under the chair, humming to himself like he didn't have a clue how much weight rested on his small shoulders. And maybe he didn't. Maybe he shouldn't. But I did. That kid was mine. And everything changed the moment I let that truth in. I wasn't just a man trying to pick up the shards of a wedding. I was a father. A late one, sure. One blindsided by the title. But no less responsible for it. Aubrey poured coffee like we were old friends, like we hadn't detonated each other's lives in different decades. She didn't speak much. Just slid the mug toward me, eyes a little hollow. He wakes up at 6:30, she said. He likes his cartoons quiet and his juice cold. I nodded. That's the thing about becoming a parent in a single breath. There's no ramp-up. No midnight talks about baby names or ultrasound pictures on the fridge. Just, a kid. Yours. Right there. Looking at you with a face that mirrors your own. I want to take him for the weekend, I said quietly. She didn't argue. Didn't smile either. Just said, okay. Back at my apartment, I cleared a space in the spare bedroom. Took the boxes of books and old sports trophies out. Replaced them with a borrowed race car bed from Jacob's garage. Hung a few dinosaur posters. I didn't know what Liam liked yet, not really, but it felt important that something, anything, was waiting for him. When I picked him up that Friday, he looked nervous. Like he wasn't sure who I was supposed to be. I wasn't either. So we just took it slow. Pizza on the first night. Movies with talking animals. A walk around the neighborhood where I let him press every crosswalk button we passed, just because. That night, after he fell asleep with a toy truck tucked under one arm, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at a folder Aubrey had handed me. Jason's folder. Encrypted drive. Password protected. She gave me the code, August 19, 1999, and when I asked why that date, her eyes went far away. That's the night your cousin died, she said. Theo. I hadn't thought of Theo in years. Car crash. Rainy highway. Jason never talked about it, but he never forgot it either. Inside the drive was a mess. Emails. Scanned documents. Audio recordings with clipped voices and names I didn't recognize. But one name popped up more than any other. Jasper Maddox. A real estate developer. The kind of guy whose billboards littered highway exits, toothy grin, arms crossed, promises of luxury condos and revitalized communities. Jason had worked for him briefly, back when he was trying to go straight. I remembered that. But what I didn't know, what these files made crystal clear, was that Maddox wasn't just a fast-talking salesman. He was corrupt. Deeply. Jason had collected safety reports, whistleblower affidavits, even a few internal memos suggesting hush money had been paid out to inspectors. Bribery. Structural failures. Corners cut. And then, this. A draft of an email, unsent, but written to me. Nate, if you're reading this, something's gone wrong. I didn't want to drag you into it unless I had to. But Maddox knows. I think he's on to me. And I think he knows about Liam. If I disappear, don't let him get near my kid. Or Aubrey. You're the only one I trust to finish what I started. I read that email 5 times. And when I was done, I sat in the dark, listening to my son breathe down the hall. Jason hadn't just vanished. He'd been erased. And Maddox, the man he was trying to expose, might have had something to do with it. The next morning, I met Nora at a park. Neutral ground. Her idea. She hadn't seen Liam yet. I didn't ask her to. But she came. And when she did, I told her everything. Not just about the paternity test or Jason or Maddox. I told her about the fear in Aubrey's voice when she said Jason was being followed. About the files. The warnings. The threats. The email. Nora didn't flinch. Just listened. She'd always been that way, quiet, but sharp. Like a calm lake that still knows how to carry a storm if it needs to. When I finished, she nodded. So what now? She asked. I think I need to go to the police. She looked me square in the eye. And tell them what? That your missing brother sent you a conspiracy folder and an unsent email? They'll need more. I know, I said. But I can't sit on this. Not if Liam's in danger. Nora paused. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a piece of paper. A letter. "I got this yesterday," she said. "No return address. No name. Just this." I unfolded it. Typed. "Neat. Simple. You're in over your head. Walk away, or you'll both end up just like him." There was no signature. Just a phone number. And a final line. "This isn't about a child. This is about legacy." I looked up at Nora. "You think Jason was killed?" She didn't blink. "I think he got too close to something. And someone doesn't want the truth coming out." That night, Liam had a nightmare. Called out in his sleep. I sat by his bed, rubbing his back, whispering that he was safe. But the truth? I didn't feel safe. Not anymore. Not with Maddox's shadow growing longer. Not with Jason gone. And not with a child in the next room who carried his blood, and mine. The wedding was over. But the war was just beginning. There's a kind of quiet that only happens when you're waiting for a knock that never comes. That's how the nights felt after I got that letter, the one with no signature, no return address, just a threat pretending to be advice. "Walk away," it said. "Or end up like him. Jason. My brother, my rival, my contradiction. Gone without a trace, and now somehow, even in his absence, still pulling strings from the shadows." I tried going to the police. I brought them Jason's file, told them everything I knew. They listened. Nodded. Took copies. Then they gave me that look, the one people reserve for grief and ghost stories. The polite dismissal of a man who seems like he's losing too much too fast to be taken seriously. They said they'd look into it. But the way they said it told me they wouldn't. Not really. So I did what I never thought I would. I went to Maddox's office. Not to confront him, I wasn't that reckless, but to see him. To look the man in the eye who might have had something to do with my brother's disappearance. Just to see what guilt looked like in a tailored suit. He was exactly what I expected. Polished. Friendly. Smiling like a politician with too much Botox. I sat in the lobby under fake lighting and a glass chandelier the size of a small car, pretending to read a brochure about luxury living redefined. And then he walked by, phone to his ear, laughing, flanked by two men who looked like they'd broken their necks nodding yes. And for a second, he looked at me. Just a flicker. No recognition. No fear. Just stillness. Like his eyes paused long enough to weigh whether I mattered. Then he was gone. But something in me knew, he knew who I was. And he wasn't afraid. Not yet. That night, Aubrey called. She'd found something. Jason left a notebook, she said. Tucked into an old coat. When I got there, Liam was asleep again. That kid could knock out in 5 minutes flat, blanket half off, mouth open, one hand clutching a toy like a lifeline. The notebook was small. Leather-bound. Worn. Inside were notes, dates, addresses, initials. But most of it didn't make sense. Just fragments. JM meeting with R at 15th and Grover. Possible payout. Parked 3 nights at construction site. No work being done. Called Theo's mom. She doesn't know. That last one stopped me. Theo. Our cousin. Dead in a crash. August 19, 1999. The password. What did Jason think connected Theo and Maddox? Aubrey didn't know. Said he'd been distant, distracted. Thought it was about work, stress. But maybe it was something else. Something that went deeper. Jason had always been impulsive. But he never chased ghosts. Not unless they were real. Back at home, I tucked the notebook into my drawer and stood in Liam's doorway for a long time, watching him sleep. I should have felt peace. Instead, I felt a cold certainty. Jason had left me a trail not just to the truth, but to danger. And someone out there didn't want me to follow it. I thought of the letter. The photos. The silence from the police. Then I looked at Liam again. And I knew I wasn't walking away. Because Jason didn't just disappear. He was disappeared. And whoever made him vanish? They didn't expect someone like me, quiet, steady, deliberate, to fight back. But they were about to find out. You can break a man's heart. But if you threaten his child, you wake something else entirely. The next time I heard from Nora, it wasn't a phone call. It was a knock. Late. Rain spitting sideways against the windows. Liam was asleep again, curled under a quilt he'd claimed as his own. I opened the door and there she was, soaked through, clutching something under her jacket like it was fragile. She didn't say hello. She just stepped inside and laid a small black flash drive on my kitchen table. "Where'd you get this?" I asked. Nora pushed her wet hair from her face. "My cousin works at the city records office. I asked her to look up permits tied to Maddox's developments. She found something. Hidden contracts. Altered dates. There was a name buried in it, Jason's. This was sent to her anonymously last night." I plugged it into my laptop and watched a folder appear. Theo, 99. Inside were images, scans of a police report I hadn't seen in over 2 decades. The crash that killed our cousin Theo. I remember it like fog, bits and pieces. Jason was in the passenger seat. He survived. Barely. But the report, it didn't match what we were told. Driver under influence, disputed. Brake failure suspected. Car serviced by Maddox Auto and Realty LLC. I blinked. What the hell was Jason doing with this? Nora pointed to the timestamp on the file. This was last accessed 2 months ago. Same week Jason disappeared. I leaned back. Mind reeling. If Maddox owned the garage that serviced the car, and Theo died in that car, then maybe Jason's crusade wasn't about business. Maybe it was about justice. Maybe it had been, all along. I took the new evidence to the police the next day. This time, a younger officer met with me privately. His name was Reed. Quiet. Sharp-eyed. He didn't give me the brush off like before. When I showed him the files, his brow furrowed. "You're saying this Maddox guy is tied to both a current disappearance and an old, possibly covered-up death?" "I'm not saying it," I replied. "The files are." He promised to look into it. Gave me his card. Wrote his cell on the back. As I left, I felt the faintest flicker of something I hadn't felt since this started. Not hope. Not yet. But traction. Back at home, I found Liam sitting on the floor, surrounded by a fortress of couch cushions and plastic dinosaurs. He handed me one and said, "This one protects the baby ones." I stared at him. A 3-year-old, already building stories about protection. Maybe it's instinct. Maybe it's memory passed down in blood. Whatever it was, I nodded and said, "Good. That's his job." He smiled like I'd passed a test. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Nora. We didn't talk about us, not directly. There was too much unspoken. But at one point, she reached for my hand. "You're not who I thought you were," she said quietly. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. She shook her head. "Don't be. You're more." At 1:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Reed. "I need you to come down to the station," he said. "Now." I sat up, pulse thudding. "Why?" He hesitated. "Because we found something. And you're going to want to see it for yourself." I looked down the hall toward Liam's room. Then at Nora. And I realized, the past wasn't done with us yet. But maybe, just maybe, we were getting close to the part where the truth couldn't hide anymore. At 2:03 a.m., I stood under the buzzing lights of the precinct hallway, waiting for Officer Reed to come back. He'd taken the flash drive. Said it might connect dots they hadn't known existed, old files, a buried investigation, whispers of a cover-up that stretched back further than anyone realized. I stared at the vending machine across from me, not seeing it. All I could think about was Jason. And whether he was already beyond saving. Reed returned holding a thin manila envelope. Not sealed. Just folded, worn at the corners like it had been passed through too many hands. He laid it on the table between us. It was turned in anonymously about an hour ago, he said. No note. No fingerprints we could pull. But we ran the contents, and they match a storage unit Jason rented 6 months ago under a fake name. I pulled out the contents slowly. Photos. Dozens. Blueprints with red circles. Memos about faulty concrete. Construction reports signed by names tied to Maddox. And then, a single, wrinkled Polaroid. Jason. Standing in front of a half-built condo. Grinning like a man who'd caught a monster in his hands and didn't know whether to run or scream. There was writing on the back. If this is it, make it count. Maddox's secrets are buried in his foundations. Literally. I swallowed hard. Jason hadn't just gathered evidence. He'd tried to build a map. A trail of rot. And someone had finally decided to make sure it was seen. 2 weeks later, a demolition crew opened up the old Lakeside Vista project, one of Maddox's earliest builds. The site had been dormant for years. Caught in litigation. Quiet. Forgotten. Until they cracked the concrete in the foundation of Unit 3B. And found human remains. Later confirmed to be the original whistleblower, the man who'd vanished in 2000 after accusing Maddox of bribery and fraud. The media exploded. The DA opened a formal investigation. And Maddox? He disappeared. Left behind a mansion with fresh prints, a packed bag, and no sign of where he'd gone. But that wasn't the ending I cared about. Not really. I buried Jason on a rainy Tuesday. No ceremony. Just me, Nora, and a boy too young to understand why I held him so tightly. They never found Jason's body. But they found enough, personal items, camera gear, a blood-stained jacket, buried in a remote property once owned by a Maddox shell company. It was enough to stop wondering. Enough to grieve. Nora didn't leave. She could have. But she stayed. Not because I asked. Because she saw something in me worth staying for. And Liam? He calls me Dad now. No prompting. No awkward transitions. Just, one day, he reached for my hand and said it like it had always been true. Dad, can we get more apples? And I said yes. Because I always will. Some stories don't get a clean ending. No courtroom finale. No justice that matches the weight of the loss. But sometimes, what you're left with is enough. A boy who looks like you. A woman who chose to believe again. And the quiet, steady promise that truth, even when buried, has a way of surfacing. Eventually. And when it does, you hold it close. You build something better on top of it. You love louder. And you never, ever stop protecting what's yours.